Ichimon Japan is made possible by Patreon support. If you would like to make sure that we can keep bringing you more content like this, then head on over to JapanKyo.com/Patreon and sign up for as little as $1 a month.
And then they toss the futon into the water slide and he wakes up as he's going down.
Yeah.
I remember watching it. The people I was watching it was like, wow, I can't believe he slept through that. And it was like, there is no way on earth he slept through that. This is fake.
No. Welcome to Ichimon Japan. I'm Tony.
And I'm Ryan.
Woo! Maybe. It's a cliffhanger episode because we're talking about TV, but I will.
Yes, question is Ryan really Ryan?
It's you're the evil twin. So, Ichimon means one question, and every episode we ask a question about Japan. Today's question is, why is Japanese TV so bad? It's awful. It's terrible, right? That's what everybody says. Actually, so this episode was inspired by a listener question. He didn't send us that exact question, but he sent us a couple questions that are basically related to this topic. And for example, we can. So his name is Scott. I'm not sure if he wants me or not to read his last name, so I'll just keep it at Scott. Thank you, Scott, for the feedback. This was actually after the episode that we did on weathering with you. He sent a nice feedback and sent us a few questions. So thank you, Scott, for that. And the first question that will kind of start things off with is, why are Japanese variety shows uniformly terrible? So
uniformly terrible. There's never been a good one ever.
All right, so I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, maybe, but I mean, look, I do think that there has been some variety shows that I've enjoyed. I'll put it that way. Like I did live in Japan for a few years, and I still, like, sometimes every once in a while, like I'll watch an illegally uploaded version of a show on YouTube or something. Some are funny, some can be, okay, but I think this goes to a larger discussion of, there is a general impression that Japanese TV just is not that great. But on the whole, right? Of course, you have exceptions, but that's the general impression that I think many people express and many people have. But and I don't think that's totally inaccurate. I think that there is a lot of like really boring or unremarkable content on Japanese TV. But before we even get into Japanese TV, I'd also put forth the argument that most TV from any country is probably not that good. Right? Like, even in the US, like, I mean, I don't know, like, you turn on the TV at us outside of prime time, and even prime time, like, a lot of times, like, it's whatever. But it depends on your taste. But if you turn it on, in the middle of the day or whatever, it's like it's not particularly remarkable TV. Like, this isn't like, the top of the top. This is kind of like daytime, filler TV, and you might get some game shows or the occasional talk show. Back in the day, you got like the trashy talk shows, like, Jerry Springer and all that. Like, all that stuff was airing.
I forgot about that.
Like, I mean, this is like 90s, early 2000s, but that was like the golden age of the really trashy talk shows. Maury Povich, you're not you are the father. I mean, that's not exactly like, classic TV. It's funny TV maybe, but it's not like high quality stuff. The Price is Right, and a lot of these game shows, they're fun and all, but I wouldn't say it's like top notch TV necessarily, right? So at least that's for the US. And like, in my experience in some other countries, like Latin American countries, or from what I've seen from a lot of like British TV, which I don't have a lot of experience in, but there are a lot of these like panel variety shows where you have like people kind of sitting and discussing things, and they watch clips and they comment on them. I mean, this is very common in Japan, but it's also quite common in other countries. I don't know. Have you seen some of those shows? Like I've seen some in like the British shows, and like I said, like in Peru and stuff, like they'll have just random celebrities or whatever, and they're like, oh, ha, 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 and laughing and talking about stuff.
I'm trying to. I watch very little TV of any country. I'm mostly a YouTube person.
Yeah, I mean, these days, me too. These days, mostly, yeah, YouTube, or like I'll watch something streaming. I don't even have my TV connected, but I do try to watch some Japanese stuff every once in a while, like non-anime stuff, just to kind of see what's going on, if there's what's popular and stuff like that. Every once in a while, I check in. But yeah, a lot of Japanese primetime TV, and even not primetime, but primetime is kind of, they call it golden hour. I think is the katakana original wasei eigo, wasei English, made in Japan English term. Golden time, I think it's called. Golden time? I think it's golden time. Golden time. I think it's golden time.
I feel like I've heard that phrase and just didn't know what it was referring to.
I have. Yeah, sorry, can't think of anything funny, but yeah, that's prime time basically, right? Like probably like maybe like 7 p.m., 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. roughly, especially on weeknights. And that's when you get like the well-known shows, right? The most popular shows, because that's when, there's the largest amount of people that are watching TV. Maybe less so these days because there's more and more, streaming and Netflix and YouTube and all that. But nevertheless, that's still when you get people like, what's that guy's name? Samma, like he's a very popular, comedian. You'd get a lot of these hosts are former comedians or ongoing, they're still comedians, but they're also hosting shows. And they will do these like variety type shows. Like, Kitano Takeshi, like he used to have a bunch back in the day, not these days anymore, because he'll show up on news stuff. He's quite old these days, but he still shows up on TV, but he doesn't have his own like personal show as far as I remember. Tamori, who used to host Waratte Itomo, and he hosted that show, what's it called? I think he used to host this show that was popular like a while ago, Spring of Trivia, Toribia no Izumi, which was popular like, I don't know, like 30 years ago in Japan, but then it got dubbed into English and then it got kind of popular like a little while later. Basically like all these big comedians, like they end up with these variety shows. And here's the simple answer. All right. Here's the simple answer for everything. Variety shows of this nature are really cheap to make. So they're really cheap to make.
Literally sit around a room and talk.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're super cheap to make because, well, okay, so they're not super cheap because you still have to pay like the main personality who's probably like the most well-paid person on the show. But then you just invite a bunch of like, somewhat well-known people. They call them talento, like these TV personalities, or sometimes a celebrity like a singer or whatever. And they just talk and laugh. And you don't have to like write a big script. You don't have to have multiple days of filming. You can probably even film multiple episodes in one day. A lot of the content is submitted by watchers, like the viewers, or there are even many shows which are based on like surveys or other shows that are based on like American or non-Japanese TV. So they'll take clips of these like little documentary shows or whatever, they'll play it or reenact it in some way, and then they'll comment on it. The Japanese personalities will comment on it. So from a production perspective, it's super efficient. You can pump out these episodes for relatively minimal cost, and you have a standard formula. Like, oh, people love Sama, people love this comedian, so they're gonna come and watch it for them first, and then they'll it's basically like junk food TV. It's almost like that kind of reality TV kind of thing where it's supposed to be kind of cheap, low cost, and not exactly like educational or anything like mind breaking, like Oscar kind of level content. It's just kind of filler TV that people just watch and don't have to think too much about. So
the best kind of TV.
Yeah, well, it can be, right? Sometimes you actually do genuinely feel like I don't want to watch like Breaking Bad or anything like that. Something that's gonna like really make me think about, question people's choices. Sometimes you just want to watch people tell funny stories, and that's fine. That's fine. What I will say is that, like, yes, a lot of this stuff is like not exactly like, A-class stuff. And I would say that some of it is actually quite mind numbing, and I've had my moments where like, oh my god, I can't watch this anymore. I have to like turn off the TV. But because they talk so much, it's so talk focused. It's actually not that bad for like learning Japanese. It can be quite helpful. It's like people telling funny stories about life and commenting on things, and it's actually like more easy to understand language than the news, for example. So I think that those can be used as a resource for studying Japanese. But you can't just like kind of absorb it mindlessly. You have to put in a little bit of effort, like look up like words that you don't know and stuff like that. So yeah, most TV in Japan, I would classify it under some kind of variety type show. And then you have like the the food shows, and there are some game shows. Okay, so let's talk about the game shows. All right, so everybody says Japanese game shows are so crazy, right? Are they crazy, Ryan? I mean, I don't, I know you don't watch that much TV, but like, I think I know your answer.
They're the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, man.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. No, they're not. So this impression of like Japanese TV game shows being so crazy really comes down to like the 80s in Japan. Maybe even as far as back to the 70s, but I would say probably mainly the 80s. And one of the things that really, I think the main thing that probably resulted in this impression that Japanese game shows are so crazy is Kitano Takeshi's Kitano Takeshi's Castle. Yeah, I think that's
which became MXC or whatever.
Yeah, MXC in the English speaking world. And don't get me wrong, it's funny, and the MXC dub was very funny. I did watch some of it in English. It's well, at least I remember it being funny. Maybe if I watch it now, it won't be that funny. But back in the day when they aired that, like I don't know, 15 years ago, it was funny. But the original was funny too because they were making these people do these like super ridiculous things. But I mean, that was kind of the joke. Like that was the joke. It wasn't like Japanese game shows are crazy and we have to be crazy. It was like we're gonna be crazy because Kitano Takeshi he's kind of like a crazy funny guy. Like especially back in the day, he was kind of pushing the limits. So that was his thing, and like to be perfectly honest, like I mean, I think like most of the people were kind of in on the joke. I don't know like to what extent like it was staged or exaggerated, but they kind of know what they're getting in for. It's not like they're being totally surprised. And then a lot of other shows, of course. There were other shows that kind of pushed some limits and stuff, but I think that it's exaggerated, this general impression. And also like, I'm quite certain that some of the shows that I've watched in more recent years, they are totally staged. Like some of these prank shows that they might like prank a celebrity. I find it very, very hard to believe that 100% of them are like genuine and not staged. They have to like have some kind of agreement with the celebrity, because some of the stuff that they do to them, it can be kind of extreme. So you would figure that there's a danger to be like sued or something like that. So I'm pretty sure that there's behind the scenes stuff, and some shows in Japan have gotten caught staging this stuff and trying to present them as legit situations. So it's not unheard of.
I definitely saw some that are fake. I guess that'll remind me of a small story. I think when I was in college, there was a clip we found on YouTube that was a prank show, I'm doing air quotation marks, of like waking up people. I don't know if they were supposed to be celebrities or just like random people they barged in on in like funny ways. And it kept escalating. So it started with like just like shouting at some guy. And then it would be like dressing up like an army person and shooting a fake gun around him. And he like jumps up and he's scared.
Yeah.
But the last one was like a truck pulls up to a water park and they like open it up and they're carrying him out on a futon and he's still supposed to be asleep. And then they toss the futon into the water slide and he wakes up as he's going down.
Yeah.
I remember watching it. The people I was watching it was like, wow, I can't believe he slept through that. And it was like, there is no way on earth he slept through that. This is fake.
No, I mean, what you have to understand, like that might have been like Gaki no Tsukai or like these, downtown Matsumoto, like he has his crew that they used to do that stuff. He's a comedian and he's done movies, but he also was, I don't know if they still do it, but every year for New Year's Eve, they would do the Waratte wa Ikenai. So it was this whole like 2, 3, 4 hour show where they put them in all these ridiculous situations and they have to like not laugh and if they would laugh, they would get slapped by some kind of like it was like a bendy like bat thing, and so it really like it makes a big sound, but it probably doesn't hurt that much. But it's good for TV. It has this nice visual like and the sound, so it looks like it hurts, but it probably doesn't. But regardless, like basically they were doing like jackass kind of stuff, but you have to understand that they're all comedians. Like they're all in on this. They're all like, they all understand that they're all like doing stuff to each other. Like, yeah, it's silly and stupid and crazy, but it's like, you can't really say that all of it is like 100% a surprise. And that guy was genuinely sleeping through all that. Like, I mean, they're playing it up for the camera, for the entertainment value.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can totally enjoy that. And I've watched like that. Like I used to love that every New Year's. Like when I was living in Japan, I would watch that every year and it was funny. But yeah, I mean, just, you have to understand that it is a planned show. Like they've planned all that out. And I'm sure many of the people that participated in that were in on most of the jokes. No, they did sprinkle in a few surprises here or there, because that just makes it funnier. But I mean, if they're in any physical harm, they've probably signed waivers or stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that stuff happens, but again, it's really, most Japanese TV is really quite mundane and unremarkable. It's not that
the vast majority is, from my experience, group of people, comedians talking to each other while some guy eats some food and they all say like, "Oh, it looks so good."
Yeah. And then you have the teroppu, which are like the like the letters that come on screen. Right. Like if they're eating something, it says like, "Oh, this is so good." It might say like "oishi," which means delicious, like on the screen, and you get all this like text all over the place. That's just such a classic Japanese style to do things. I'm not sure where that originates from, but it's just a way to, I don't know, I guess keep it very visually stimulating. Because maybe part of the reason is that it really isn't that visually stimulating. They're just talking. So you need to have like, blah, 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 like things coming on and the sound effects, and sometimes like the gunshots and the wow sound effect, which is like, now YouTubers like in the English speaking world are using that. But it started in Japan, and it gets very wacky. But I think part of the wackiness of it is the fact that it's so mundane. So they need to kind of spice it up in some way. So yeah, you have that, and then something we can discuss also is the news in Japan, which sometimes like it's really baffling. Like I still watch like some national news in Japan via YouTube, and some of the stories that they run in these national TV news programs are just absolutely absurd. Like really, like this needs to be reported on a national level kind of thing. I mean, you have one example. I'll just give my example really quickly. So I remember this was back when I was living in Japan, and so there was a statue of so I guess I should start. There's this long running anime in Japan called Sazae-san, and this thing has been going on for, I don't know, like 60 years or something, I think. And it started as like a news strip, comic book kind of thing, comic strip, like probably, I don't know, like 80 years ago or something, like a really long time ago. And it airs every Sunday, and it's just kind of like wholesome family, a little bit funny, but kind of just regular life anime family style show. And the main character is Sazae-san, and her dad is, I think his name is Namie, I think, if I remember correctly. Anyway, the news story was that there was a statue of Sazae-san's dad somewhere in Tokyo, I think, or somewhere, and somebody had stolen like the hair, one strand of hair from the character's head, because he has this very like characteristic like one hair like standing up, and so somebody had stolen that from the statue. And this was like national news. Like, it's like, okay, like, I mean, it's annoying, but like, does this need to be on the national news? Like, isn't there something else more pressing in Japan that people could be talking about? I see stories like this quite regularly. And like, to be honest, like, yeah, like the even like nightly news in the US, like something on NBC or whatever, sometimes they air like stupid stories, but for the most part, I think it's like, politics and stuff like that. But I don't know, like I get this impression that Japanese news has these very like soft stories that, whereas they could be talking about more substantial stuff, they throw in like stories that are not national news. At best, they are local news. Right. I think you made a joke one time, like, oh, it's like, you might see like a news story about somebody stealing a bike on the news. And actually, like I have seen that. I've actually seen that. And this was like more recent. This was like a few months ago, maybe. Somebody had an expensive bike. They parked it outside their store. I guess they ran like a ramen shop or something. They parked it outside, and then they went inside, and there was a camera that caught somebody stealing the bike, right? And then they stole the bike. So you had this footage of somebody stealing the bike. So this actually was national news, right? This was, I don't remember where it was, but this was national news on this Japanese TV show, on this Japanese news show. And like, okay, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see somebody stealing a bike on footage, but again, I go back to the question, like, is this national news?
Definitely.
Somebody stole a bike in Japan and the whole country needs to know about this? Like, I don't know. I think this happens quite a bit. But, you could say it's a slow news day, but I don't know. Like, I feel like there's just got to be more to something better than like somebody stole a bike.
Well,
So,
did they find the bike, or did they? Oh, never mind.
I don't know if they found the bike. I never hear about the stories that they found the bike. I always just see, they stole a bike. So yeah, I don't know, man. Like Japan. So terrestrial TV, like the mainstream TV, is very, for the most part, can be very trying to appeal to everyone, right? They try not to push too many buttons. Like you don't see like that kind of Daily Show, late night comedy kind of political humor. People that do that can often be, like they get in trouble. Like Kuwata Keisuke, one of the most well-known, like I guess singers or musicians in Japan. Like he did something even slightly political and got in a little bit of hot water for that. This was several years ago. So yeah, it's just not the same kind of environment that we see on American TV. But that being said, like if you look on like broadcast satellite, like BS as they call it, or like maybe even cable or probably like streaming kind of stuff, like you do get the more risque, you do get the more kind of like extreme humor that maybe won't fly on Japanese TV. If you also listen to late night radio in Japan, that stuff can be much more in various senses like risque. So a little bit more on the sexual side, but a little bit more on the kind of like hot water. It might get you in a little bit of hot water kind of comedy. Like radio kind of pushes the limits a little bit more. So, I do listen to some like comedians on Japanese radio sometimes. I download that. And I used to watch some, stuff on YouTube from broadcast satellite because it's kind of like, it's more fun. Like it can be still that kind of variety show sort of thing, but they're not as afraid about what they can say because the audience is much more limited, and it's okay to kind of push the buttons and the limits a little bit more. All right, and then we can discuss this other question that Scott sent us. So why doesn't anything other than TV and film, anime, break outside of Japan?
There's laws preventing it.
Yeah. Whenever something starts to get popular abroad, they go, hey, this can't happen. Stop it.
It's a very strange law.
Yeah, it is. And they have this weird method of measuring popularity outside of Japan. It's like a little thermometer kind of thing. And, as the red stuff starts going higher, then the Japanese guy comes out and says, hey, stop watching. He tells the foreigners, this isn't for you guys. This is for Japan. So
yeah, they're very thorough.
They are. Yeah, it is pretty weird. But I mean, so what's the most popular Japanese media outside of Japan? I mean, I think you could say anime. Just
definitely.
Yeah. I think that's not an exaggeration. Anime has the most cultural impact in terms of media, and the most regular, people watching it. There's people every season, there's new shows come out and there's people watching, every season, blah, blah, blah. So anime, yeah, of course. But movies to some extent also, yeah, of course, Kurosawa and the classics. But also sometimes more modern movies. What's that movie that came out a couple years ago? Drive with me. Let's go for a drive, something with a drive. Like it got some like Oscar buzz. I think it might have won an Oscar, maybe.
It won something. I remember it was big news, but I don't remember.
Yeah,
exactly
Drive Shio or something like that. It was like, yeah, something about a drive, like to go for a drive.
I think it was called Drive with Me.
Yeah, I think that's the English title. That got a lot of buzz. I did not watch it.
Me neither. As you can tell by my inability to remember his name.
Yeah. And then maybe 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, there was that movie, The Departed, Okuribito. That also, yeah, that was huge at the time. It got a lot of attention abroad. I did watch that one maybe a year or two ago. I enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. And then of course, Kitano Takeshi's movies and, various movies, every once in a while they get some good buzz and good attention. And then there's a whole kind of cult film, fan base for, horror movies and like Takashi Miike and various filmmakers in Japan. That make it to the abroad, samurai movies, blah, blah. So movies definitely do have an impact, but in terms of overall viewership, maybe anime is on top. And so why is this? I think because part of it, to be perfectly honest, is that I think a lot of these movies, well, maybe not the movies so much as the anime, they are being made to appeal to a wider audience, right? They are specifically being made so that, non-Japanese audiences can enjoy them as well. Increasingly, more and more studios are aware of that because my understanding is that anime is so expensive to make that they really only make their money back through licensing and maybe to some extent merchandising as well, if it takes off a lot. But really, it's the licensing that brings back their money, because just broadcasting in Japan probably it's not worth it for them. So yeah, you have to have some awareness. Now, of course, it comes down to packaging Japanese culture in a way that's appealing to the foreign audience, right? If you have a show that is all about making jokes about references to inside jokes about Japanese comedians, that's just not going to fly, right? You have to, do this weird localization, Crayon Shin-chan, for example. It went through that, right? Crayon Shin-chan it's a funny show. It's an anime, but it's not it's very Japanese daily life kind of thing. And so when I think it was Cartoon Network, right, that they aired that in the US, they went with a really over the top, really Americanized localization, which was totally in your face. You could tell this was a total crazy localization. I thought it was funny at the time. I don't know how it would feel if I watched it again. But I appreciated the whole total wackiness. They just decided to kind of go with a whole different thing. Sometimes you go with these crazy localizations that work, in my opinion. Because if you
remember, that used to be more common back then. Because I know another famous one is Samurai Pizza Cats, where
oh yeah,
what they made out of it is completely different than what it actually was.
Yeah, so
I guess Rangers 2 is kind of the same thing.
Oh yeah. So back in from starting maybe in the 70s into the 90s, there was that whole thing of let's just take the footage, completely change the story, butcher it, and not even acknowledge that it's from Japan, and just try to package it as its own original thing. And and then that's when you get Pokemon, when they would have the rice balls, they would call them jelly donuts, of course, right? Just One Piece went through that, and Saint Seiya went through that, and Magic Knight Rayearth went through that. So many anime shows in the 90s and before then, of course, Macross with got turned into Robotech and blah blah blah. Just totally different thing. The interesting thing about what happened with Shin-chan and maybe one or two other shows is that I think a lot of people were in on the joke. The localization was kind of a joke in and of itself. So I thought that was a fun approach. Like it wasn't just like, let's totally change it and try to hide the fact that it was originally from Japan. It's like, no, we understand that if we were to just translate this, like it probably wouldn't be funny. So we got to kind of like make it kind of wacky and crazy. And like, I appreciated that. But my larger point here is that the stuff that makes it outside of Japan is the stuff that like kind of like anybody can enjoy. Right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to have this like deep cultural knowledge of Japanese pop culture and history and recent cultural and historical events and politics and blah blah blah. Like these variety shows, like they're talking about very local stuff sometimes. Like stuff that happens in like maybe some local prefecture's little town, and only some people might know like the cultural reference to this 1988 like Japanese pop idol or whatever. Like so. That stuff is just not going to fly like outside. Like you have to like, even if you localize it, it's not funny, right? It's not entertaining.
Yeah.
And that's most Japanese media, right? Most Japanese media is not like really like, even if you were to translate it word for word, it just would not be that interesting because you don't get what the people are talking about. So, I mean, I think really it comes down to that, but let's think about like 2 live action shows that I think have taken off. One is Hajimete no Tsukai. I think that's the title. And it's this classic like Japanese show that has been airing for a long time where like the parents will send their little kid, usually it's like really like elementary school, like pretty young. They'll send them off to do like a task, a chore. And there's like, go buy milk from the store. I need you to buy like milk and cereal and blah blah blah. And they've never gone out by themselves, so they have to go down to the store and they have the money and they buy the thing, and it's so cute, and they get the wrong milk or the wrong product, and then the lady has to help them at the store, and it's just an adorable little story. And they come back and they're having trouble like carrying the milk because it's so heavy and they're so little, and they get home and then the mom's like, oh, thank you so much. Oh wait, this is the wrong one. Oh, but thank you. Like it's heartwarming stuff, right? It's like, comfort food kind of stuff. And that is something that you can watch, and it doesn't matter like the language, like you can appreciate it and it's kind of cute. And at the same time, maybe you might learn a little bit about Japanese culture, and you get to see these Japanese like landscapes and towns and whatever, where these kids are walking around. And that has apparently done quite well, I think, on Netflix. So in the English speaking world. So I get why that did well. Right? It's cute and it's easy to understand. And then the other one is You wa Nani shi Nippon e, right? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
You've seen that one, right?
I've watched a lot of that one.
Yeah. And I mean, but that's kind of like in a way it's kind of similar to the one that I just saw. It's like you follow somebody's story, right? Like you follow this foreigner that arrives in Japan, and they like surprise them supposedly. I don't know how, maybe some of it is pre-orchestrated perhaps, but regardless, like it's interesting because you follow somebody's real story, right? They're like, oh, I'm a scientist and I'm here for a conference where we're going to be talking about squid, the population of squid or something like that. It's like this super niche thing sometimes, right? But they're in Japan and you follow their story as they go and travel through Japan and do their thing. And you learn a little bit about Japan. You learn about this person, and you understand that there's all kinds of people that come to Japan for different reasons, right?
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Well, some of them are better than others, but it does follow people who come on like unique, I was going to say quests, but that makes it sound more like fantasy-ish.
Yeah.
For unique goals, I guess. And some of them are kind of funny and silly, and some of them are like really personal and kind of like emotionally moving. And it does kind of try to play into the like, don't foreigners love Japan cliche. But at the same time, it kind of breaks that cliche because some of the people coming are like extremely knowledgeable about Japanese things, like more than the staff of the show. So it does kind of show that like it's not only like anime fans coming to like buy like figurines and stuff. There's a whole bunch of people here for a whole bunch of reasons. Yeah.
I agree with that. I think that a lot of Japanese TV plays into that stereotype of, the foreigner that absolutely loves Japan. And we both like Japan, whatever. But, like they kind of play it up to a degree where it's like the foreigner is just there to say how amazing Japan is. Like that's kind of their role. And to me, like that gets really boring really fast, really annoying really fast. But this show, the You wa Nani shi Nippon e, I do think that yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but they do show a wider variety of people and different interests, and how somebody can be in Japan, for a scientific thing, for a passion thing. Like I remember one story that I saw where a guy was looking for this, like I think it was like an original cabinet of like Space Invaders or something like that, like this super niche, like old arcade game, and he was going from store to store looking for it, and he was some American or maybe like European. I don't remember who he was, but interesting stuff. Like this other guy was going to Japan for like a kendama tournament. Like he was like some really good kendama guy. And so like you see all kinds of people, right? It's not just the anime fan. Sometimes people it's like not related at all to anime. Like, so I like it. I like what that does. And it's relatable, right? It's both a travel show, but also like a personal show, and you learn a little bit about Japan and just people in general. So I get why that would be popular outside of Japan as well. I think it airs on Netflix or one of these streaming platforms.
There's not a lot of them on Netflix. We signed up for some Japanese service to watch a whole bunch more, but Netflix does have some,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, honestly, I just watch them on YouTube. Somebody, people upload them sometimes.
That's maybe better because so on YouTube, I think you get like little 10-minute clips of just one person's story. The actual episodes are like really long. They're like 2 hours, and they have usually multiple ongoing things.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, some of those shows, they are quite long, and maybe that's just because the show is like so easy, cheap to produce. They're just like, all right, just let's fill 2 hours of TV with it.
Yeah, I remember once we were like having dinner and one finished, and like the next ones are like, okay, we'll watch one more. And it turned out it was some kind of special that went on for like 3 hours.
Yeah. That happens.
They did call it to something special, but they never said 3 hours. And they call everything to something special because it's hosted by like comedians.
Yeah.
And like an hour and a half in, we're like, this one's long. How long is it? And we check, like, wow, we're not even halfway.
Yeah, they just fill the whole evening with that. I know they do that for other shows as well. But again, I think it comes down to the cheap thing. Like if they have an audience and people like it, all right, let's just make more of it. Let's just make it really long, and people are going to watch it anyway. And even if they don't, well, it was cheap to make, so not a big deal. So yeah, I mean, like I said, like why does so much stuff not break out of Japan? Because I think like you just have to, there's that wall, right? Like if you don't have that cultural understanding, it's just not going to be interesting to most people. So the stuff that is relatable, the stuff that anybody can kind of watch for the first time and still enjoy in some way, like that, I mean, that's going to be the stuff that is easiest to catch on, right? Outside
and
of
most
Japan.
of the anime, like they create, especially the ones that are popular, they create their own world, like Dragon Ball or One Piece. So you don't need any knowledge of Japan. They don't feel Japanese. They feel like some new fantasy world.
Yeah. So everybody starts at zero on that.
Yeah. But like if you watch a TV show about like a family working in Japan or something, there's a whole bunch of stuff. It's made for Japanese audiences. There's a whole bunch of stuff that sort of assumes that outside viewers don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, there's a loyal kind of audience for Japanese dramas, but overall, like the audience for anime is way bigger than Japanese dramas.
And probably the Japanese drama viewers aren't people with no knowledge of Japan.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's hard to say exactly, but I get the hunch that they might have a bit more of that interest in Japanese society itself. Because like, for example, like, Cowboy Bebop, or like you said, Dragon Ball Z, like these are things that like anybody from any country can enjoy, right? Like Trigun or Evangelion, all these classic shows, like all these like science fiction shows, Attack on Titan, something more recent, Naruto, like ninja stuff, but it's this own unique world, right? It's not like, you need to understand some, pop cultural references from 1990s Japan, like, and even when there are those little jokes here and there, like those can be localized in a way that is still understandable. But when the whole show is like that, it's just it gets to the point where it's like it's not enjoyable anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's the main thing. And a lot of Japanese films, like I would probably venture to say the bulk of the Japanese film industry is producing probably relatively low cost films that are targeted at the Japanese audience, and are more on that kind of like, you need to kind of have a better understanding of Japan to really be able to enjoy it. there is a market for this kind of global cinema thing, but I would say probably there's so many films that are in Japan that really never get much of attention outside of Japan.
Honestly, I think there's so many films in Japan that don't get too much attention in Japan.
I know that's true too.
For a while, I was trying to like boost my Japanese by just like watching Japanese movies.
Uh-huh.
And I tried discussing it with like Japanese coworkers and found overwhelmingly most people had no idea what movies I was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, maybe I'm not sure what's exactly going on right now. Maybe because of streaming, perhaps more people are watching movies. But back when I was living there, 2010 to 2013, and people like, streaming wasn't as big as it is now. Like going to the theater was just not as big of a thing as it was when I was living in the US, right? Like in the US, I got the impression that more people would go actually to the movie theater. But in Japan, it's less of a thing, and it might be just due to like more work hours and less freedom in that sense. But yeah, I don't know, a little bit less of a movie going culture.
Yeah, I think I always suspected they kind of priced themselves out of it.
That's true too.
Now, because American prices have been raising constantly for the last 20 years, they're kind of similar.
Yeah, that's true.
Like when both of us came here, depending on where you're from, I think a movie ticket in Japan was at least double, sometimes triple the American cost.
Yeah, the first time I went, it was like more than double, I think.
Yeah, I think when I first moved here in California, where I'm from, it was probably about like $7.
Yep.
But in Japan, it was like 18.
Yeah.
So if you came with a family, that's insane.
Yeah, so true. I didn't think about that. Yeah, go see a Ghibli movie, and you're talking maybe like $60 or something, and yeah, that's tough. Whew. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it that way, but that's true. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, in the US, it's gotten more and more expensive, so it's not that big of a difference now. But also now you have more and more streaming platforms, right? Like Netflix and all that, and Disney Plus, and so I don't know how the Japanese movie industry is holding up in terms of the theater. But it's an interesting question, because I mean the US is certainly, I think they're probably not doing great because they're struggling with that, but I'm not sure what's going on in Japan. And overall, like movies in Japan also, they are far less, their budgets are much smaller, so that's another thing that goes on. They're way smaller budget.
That's the other big thing I was going to point out, is like when it's anime or manga, because it's drawn, you can kind of just make whatever you want. But when you're trying to do it live action, you can't make fantasy worlds or special effects so easily.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's also one of the reasons that like Korean dramas have gained popularity internationally, but Japan hasn't. I don't know what like began the like movement, but eventually they received higher budgets than Japan. So now they're able to produce stuff that's got a budget where most stuff in Japan doesn't.
Yeah, that's really true. And also the thing about the anime is that like you can produce anything, but also like, for example, Makoto Shinkai or Ghibli or whatever, this is going to make global revenue, right? This is going to be big around the world. So they can invest the money to make it like these absolutely beautiful things. And it can cost, millions and millions of dollars, but there's a good chance that they're going to recoup it and make much more money than what they invested. So it's worth the investment. But at the current point in time, like if you invest millions and millions and millions into a Japanese drama, there just isn't a market big enough in the outside world to support that. So that's the thing. Now, could that change? Of course, like if they have some kind of breakout hit like Squid Game in Japan, I don't know what like Octopus Game or something, right?
You like Squid Game, now prepare for Octopus Game. No octopuses also appear anywhere in this.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't expect octopi. So yeah, I mean, I think it's possible, and that could be something that kind of reinvigorates the Japanese entertainment industry. But I don't think they've quite gotten that in TV. I mean, I think they sometimes get that with the movies, but with the films, but not with TV yet. We'll see what happens, but it would be great to see that.
The one I do find a little bit surprising is the K-pop music becoming so much more popular than J-pop. I'm not a pop fan, but to me, they sound pretty much the same, but one is super, super popular and one is not.
So I haven't kept up with it. Like my impression was that the K-pop was like, it kind of showed more of a Western influence. Like it had more of that, like, more modern electronic and hip hop kind of vibe a lot of times. Whereas like Japan, they kind of stick to their own, like they do their own thing. And they don't really, a lot of the more popular stuff, they have this very J-pop sound. It's different from what's popular in the US at the moment. So I think maybe K-pop has been able to appeal to the outside world in a way by kind of combining its own unique things with the Western culture, whereas Japan is kind of like not too concerned with the outside world. And like there's been multiple times where they've tried to build these groups that are for the outside world. Like there's one that they're doing right now, and I can't remember what it's called. It's I think it's one of these Johnny's groups. And they just released a song like with the past few months. But anyway, they're based in LA and they're trying to like be this group that's in the US and whatever. And to be perfectly honest, like I don't think they're getting much traction in the mainstream like US like music, whatever, pop scene. So they haven't been able to crack that, but K-pop has been really, really good at that. They've been able to, build the right kind of fusion between like the kind of Korean stuff and then mix in the kind of more, English speaking world pop music scene to that. And I don't know, they're doing really good. So, yeah. But basically that's it. I mean, like if you come to Japan or you're watching online, whatever, just know that most of the stuff that's on Japanese TV is really not that interesting, but don't say that it's because it's Japan. Just say it's corporations have to fill 24 hours of television, and most of the stuff that is going to be on TV is just not going to be that interesting regardless whether you are, because they have to keep costs down and fill hours.
Yeah.
I think that goes for anywhere. And then, just understand that most stuff in Japan is much more low budget because just there's less money that can be invested, right? Like it's not as profitable as America, which is like the biggest entertainment market. So of course, like the US is making stuff for the entire world. So, and the US is also they're going to make more money just than the US alone. So, budgets are bigger and they can spend more time on this stuff. So it's just, de facto what it is. But that's also part of the reason why anime has become so big, because they can actually monetize that outside of Japan.
Also, I don't think any country is going to have literally all aspects of their culture popular everywhere in the world. Because even America doesn't. Like, the fact that Japan is so big with anime and manga and food internationally is still a pretty big accomplishment.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, in terms of, the cultural exports of Japan is one of the most influential countries in the world, I would say. Because, like, if you even think about, like, how video games alone, like, all the Nintendo stuff from, decades now, Konami and Capcom, everything, just that alone, like, the cultural impact that has had on so many of us. Like, what other country aside from the US can claim something like that, right? So it's the cultural impact that Japan has had on especially people of our age range and younger is really, really significant. So a lot of Japanese TV sucks, but there's that's not all Japan is. There's more to it. So
yeah. And we're also kind of forgetting video games are another big, huge cultural export from Japan.
Yeah, man. Like, video games are huge. Yeah. And I mean, again, that's like the anime thing that I was talking about. Like, why can they produce like such like the Zelda, Breath of the Wild and, Mario and Sony PlayStation and all the stuff that they've developed, why can they do that? It's because it's a global market, right? It's not just only for Japan. They can actually, make money outside of Japan, and thus they can reinvest it because there's just more profit to be made. So of course you get these bigger and bigger budgets, and that has been a really good thing for the industry as a whole. I'm sure things are much more competitive nowadays, but nevertheless, Japan still is very well known for the video game industry and the games that they put out and the consoles as well.
Yes.
Yep. So there you go, Scott. Hope you got something out of that. And we'll leave it at that. And if you have any questions, you can send them over to ichimon@japankyo.com, and we'll do our best to answer it. Sometimes we don't know, and we might just say like, we'll do an entire episode that's loosely related to the question, and then at the end we'll say, actually, like, I couldn't find an answer for this, sorry. That's that's kind of how it goes. All right, so thanks, Ryan, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see y'all next time. Send more questions and try watching Japanese TV.